Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Chad King. Chad is a prior copy salesman and did a tremendous job on that. I want to hear a little bit about that, Chad. Then he moved to flipping homes and then to multifamily commercial real estate. So really want to unpack Chad's story and excited to have you on. So thank you so much for being on The Wealth Flow.
Thanks, Keith. Very excited to talk shop with you. Happy to be on here.
Awesome. And I typically start way back, Chad, to where you grew up and what eventually led you first to copy sales and then deciding to get out of that with a successful career there into flipping homes and so on.
Sure. So yeah, just real quick, because I know a lot of people want to get into the meat of the tactical stuff that can help them move the needle forward. But I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I was a military brat. My father was 30 years Navy, and have very good relationship with my parents. And early on in I've always been a worker, right? My dad would maybe clean helicopters, when I was 8 years old for, like $1 and free helicopter rides. And I had my first job at 14. So I've always worked during the summers in between school and kind of always had the hard work and integrity kind of beaten into me from my dad. And then my mom was very much a good steward of other people. And I got my compassion for helping people and my stewardship from my mother. Then, skipping forward, about past schooling, I got degrees in finance and accounting from Florida State University. I like numbers. I'm a numbers guy, very much spreadsheets driven, very logical. I prefer the numbers that have dollar signs in front of them. I really like how money works. Right. I've always been fascinated with how wealth is created, how money works, how it's multiplied. And that kind of was what led me into what I do now, which is commercial real estate, because I think it's the best way to preserve and multiply capital, especially the ways that we do it, purchase and value add deals and stuff. So I studied that in school, and then I got out and I went to work for Xerox. So I actually sold copiers door to door. I was really trying to get into a job that didn't have a ceiling over my head from an income standpoint, because I knew that I would outwork pretty much anybody. So I wanted to make sure that I had not a set fixed rate of pay. So I started selling copiers, did pretty well on door-to-door sales. I was in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, just door knocking big office buildings. The thing that made me want to really transition was a few things, is not wanting to climb the corporate ladder and trade, the best 40 years of my life so that I can retire on the last 15 years. I really didn't want to play that trade out. And also, I really didn't want, I didn't want my managers and my VP's job. And I think that's a very telltale sign is if you don't want to grow within the company you're in, that's probably a bad signal that you should make a change. So I had a lot of those things that were kind of gnawing at me. And I was really studying successful people. Like I was looking at what these wealthy people had. And I kept seeing real estate among them. Like I kept seeing like the wealthiest of the wealthy, like they all had that like real estate portfolio. Like they all had commercial apartments, triple net lease. They all had it. So I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I was still in my early 20s. I had committed to one woman. We were getting married. And I was like, all at once, I was like, I'm quitting this job. Let's do this entrepreneur thing. Started flipping houses. As you mentioned, I flipped 400 houses Did a lot of wholesale deals too. So that includes some wholesale contracts, but flipped 400 houses, built that business up with some partners, and then exited and got into buying small multifamily. It really, the flipping business was very transactional. We were making a lot of active income, but there was no residual. All right. That's one of my issues with the flipping business is it's a job, right? You have to continue to flip in order to make that active income. So until you get that active income deployed into apartment complexes that can then pay you some residual, you're going to keep on that hamster wheel. So yeah, I made that transition from flipping over into commercial, buying small multifamilies with the money that we had, and then got into 506B and 506C syndication, started pooling some money together to buy some bigger assets. And we've done 15 syndications now. I bought 24 commercial properties, 25 actually as of Friday. We closed 125 unit on Friday. So as of Friday, 25 commercial transactions. We've taken 11 full cycle. So where we've repositioned the property, sold, returned capital to investors with an average of a 28% IRR. So we sold 11 deals now, and yeah, we're just 120 million currently in assets under management. Most of it's right here in Middle Tennessee. I live south of Nashville in Murfreesboro. And most of it's right here in Middle Tennessee. And we're just operating this stuff. Got some more deals closing in the pipeline. And we're just active commercial real estate operators right now.
Nice. Okay. Well, why don't we unpack some of that? I guess first, let's go all the way back to your Xerox days, if you don't mind. It's funny that that's obviously the same company. I'm sure you're probably aware, but like Robert Kiyosaki, right, started selling with Xerox as well, and really learned that sales basis. And so, just curious as to if there were some lessons that you learned from selling copiers that you could apply to today's business. And then, one thing that you mentioned, I just maybe want you to expand on it a little bit, but you mentioned that, you looked at your bosses and didn't necessarily want their job, right? And that is obviously a pretty big sign. But what about their job did you not want and did you not see for yourself, and that caused you kind of pivot?
Yeah. So I'll hit that question, and then I'll talk about some of my top takeaways from working at Xerox. But I have this saying is just you should take advice from people that you're willing to trade places with in that particular area. And I think that's a big problem that I see today in society is just everybody's an expert, right? With social media, everybody's got an opinion. A lot of people ask their loved ones for their opinion, and they're taking that advice, and those people truly are not in a situation that you would even be willing to trade places with. So why are you considering their advice?
Yeah.
And I had noticed that some of my, my superiors were not in fiscal or life situations that I was willing to trade places with, yet they were giving me advice on what I should be doing with my career path. So I'm like, well, you're the VP of sales, and you're making $200,000 and it's taking you 30 years to get there. Like, why would I'm not going to try. I wouldn't trade places. I wouldn't trade 30 years to get there. And I just wouldn't. That was my situation with where I was at. So that's kind of like that advice has always really stuck with me, of just making sure that you would trade places with the person in that particular area. So there was that. I think from Xerox, what I pulled, they have a phenomenal sales training program. And I think that's where I really get a few of the qualities that I think have transpired or transposed over into the real estate space. Number one is just like chasing no's and moving from no to no without losing any enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. Far too many people get hung up on, the deal or getting one across the finish line, or they started cold calling, or they send out some campaigns and nobody responds, and they're just like, oh, this doesn't work, or they're deflated. Man, we had to wake up every day and literally just like chase no's, because every single one gets you one step closer. And, when people tell you no, or people tell you to F off, or I heard all kinds of stuff walking around office buildings, just interrupting people in the middle of the day, right? It just not to take it personally, because it's not about you, it's about them. And, what they're saying to you is not a reflection on you, so people take that stuff personally. So you got to be able to take the emotions out of it and just build a funnel. So Xerox taught me really how to track my KPIs and build a funnel. So at the top is the amount of doors you knock on. That whittles down to the amount of prospects you get to speak with, which whittles down to the amount of presentations that you get to do, which whittles down to the amount of offers that you get to send out, which whittles down to the amount of contracts that come back signed, which whittles down to your commission. So everything in life is a funnel, and it's activity at the top. far too many people are not putting enough activity at the top. If you're trying to buy real estate, you need to make 10 times as many offers that you think you need to make to get a deal across the finish line. So building that funnel out and making it, pertinent to you and your business is really important. And then loading 100 times more activity through the top of the funnel and then removing bottlenecks within the funnel is going to be your key to kind of growing a business right now. The other thing that I would say is, it taught me to get creative too. I think people need to get creative on how they get somebody's attention. Your biggest problem right now, and I'm talking to the listeners, whatever you're trying to do, your biggest problem right now is obscurity. Nobody knows who you are and nobody knows what you're after. You could be trying to break into the single family space. You could be trying to get into commercial real estate, buy multifamily properties. Your biggest problem right now is that every broker in your market and every seller in your market doesn't know who you are and doesn't know that you're interested in buying that. So you need to start thinking about how you can creatively get your name and your brand and your company out there and get people to know who you are and what you're doing. And I started doing that, when I was at Xerox, kind of doing some creative stuff to get people to know who I was. And that was my thing, is just get out of obscurity, get people to know what you're up to, what you're doing. And that way they can transact with you and do business with you. So if you're trying to buy my commercial real estate building, your number one problem is I don't know who you are. So that's your first problem you can solve. So that's some of the tips that I learned.
No, that's good. That's
from Xerox.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff. And then tell me a little bit more maybe about your, your flipping business. How long did you flip homes before leaving Xerox? And then what did your team look like at that point when you were ready to, you'd built it big enough? Yeah.
Sure. So 2016 was the first year that I was really like full-fledged and like actually flipping. Like that was my business. It started off really slow. I was trying to do a one-man band and recreate the wheel. And like, I've noticed that partnerships can help you go way faster, way further, and you can do a lot more together. I currently, of those 25 deals that I mentioned on the commercial real estate side, there's only 2 of them that I don't own with partners, right? So I have partners on almost every transaction that I do. And what I'll tell you is like, I beat my head against a wall for the first 6 months, just trying to figure out how to even get started. And it wasn't until I started leveraging mentors, coaches, and then ultimately partners that I really started to scale that business. So I brought the sales acumen side of the things to buying single family homes, because we would buy them directly from the seller. So we would spend money on marketing and drive leads. And then I was the guy who would go and sit down on the couch and negotiate the deal and get the signed contract. I enjoyed doing that very much. Difference in single family versus multifamily is single family is very emotional driven, multifamily is very logically driven. But that being said, I was kind of the guy that would go close the deals, and I really enjoyed doing that. Ultimately built a sales team. I had 5 salespeople working underneath me. We were buying properties in 3 to 4 different markets, really 3-4 markets that we were playing around in. And we ultimately had 14 employees total in that business. A company was called Blackjack Real Estate. I was driving the sales department. My partner, Bill Allen, who had started the company, we did 175 deals in 2018. Wow. And we were doing, between 150 and 180 deals a year. So we had a pretty well-oiled machine, running that company, but I was, he had the marketing aspect of it. So he was amazing at marketing and driving leads, but he had a missing linchpin in the sales side. So he would drive leads, but he would send just horrific salespeople to these calls that would not be able to close deals and get commitments from people, remove objections, take people through a process. Like I could talk for hours on sales aspects. Yeah. But so I plugged into his vehicle, started adding value to that. And then we ultimately took off and we're still partners today. So the trajectory of 400 houses was between 2016 and 2020.
Okay. That's huge. Pretty amazing. As far as like some of the KPIs and stuff, if you can recall them with the flipping business, how much were you spending on leads, and were you doing this mainly through direct mail? It sounds like you were doing some cold calling as well. Sure. How did you drive that?
Yeah, great question. We send out like 70,000 postcards a month. So postcards we were consistent with them. And we did high volume on postcards, but our main drivers were postcards, PPC, SEO, cold text messages, ringless voicemails, and cold calling. So those were kind of the methodologies that we had. We experimented with some bandit signs and stuff like that too, and those are always good. Driving for dollars, things like that. But as far as the paid stuff,
Yeah.
it was direct mail, PPC, SEO. It was everything that I mentioned. I remember distinctively the KPIs that we really tracked were leads in, appointments conducted, contracts, wholesale revenue, flip revenue, and then your main drivers are going to be your cost per acquisition is kind of the big one, because your cost per acquisition and your cost per lead, your cost per signed contract, if you can track those metrics, basically you can figure out exactly how much money it's costing you to even just get a phone call and then go sit with somebody on their couch and then ultimately get a deal across the finish line. We averaged about an $18,000 wholesale fee, and our cost per acquisition in our more expensive markets was like $8,000 or $9,000. In our more tertiary, secondary markets, our cost per acquisition was like $6,000, $7,000. So it would cost us that much to get the deal across the finish line, but our average profit was $18,000 on some of those wholesale deals, and then our average flip profit was about $32,000. So just there's some KPIs that you really need to dial in, so that you can. If you don't measure it, you can't grow it. And that's, I think, some think that, you could just pour a bunch of gasoline on a fire, but like if you don't know what you're tracking, how are you going to improve? So those are some of them.
No, for sure. Makes a whole lot of sense. And, you might be able to improve the number of people responding to your pieces, to your, to your ads. But at the end of the day, if you're not, converting those as well, then you're kind of spinning your wheels. So that's cool stuff. And so at what point did you, you mentioned it being kind of transactional as far as the flipping goes, but obviously you were generating some pretty good income with it as well. What led you to decide, gee, I think I probably need to change direction here completely?
I think it was really more of, I think there was a period there where we did 163 deals. And I think at the end of 2019, we actually did 180 deals. And I remember like December 31st passing, and we had this big Christmas party that we celebrated, that we had this big win, 180 deals. It was awesome. Everybody was pumped. But then like January 1st came, and I remember being like, man, we got to go out and do it again. Right. Yeah. And it's like, there was no residual benefits of everything that we did other than the cash in the bank that was taxed at a very high rate. So not only did we have to go do it again, but also I had a massive tax bill that was basically coming down the pipe that I didn't have any way to defer or deflect. So it was a combination of wanting to get into more of a legacy play, start to build the net worth, to get some residual, to get some things that are going to produce some residual income. And then ultimately the tax benefits too, because the stuff we buy right now is giving us cost segregation studies that give us losses from depreciation that we can help offset active income from our other companies. So it was a mixture of a combination of a lot of those things. To be honest with you, I got a little burnt out, just doing that many transactions, dealing with that many people. It's a lot, and you have a lot of emotions tied in the single family space. And so I just needed to, it was kind of my next stage of growth, right? Is to get into commercial real estate and start buying and holding some of this stuff so that we can create a legacy and help other people too.
Makes sense. No, that's cool. And so your partner from the flip business is now, both of you kind of moved into multifamily kind of together when it comes to that.
Yeah, he still has a flipping business, and I own my company, 100% of Titan Capital Group, but we still do deals together. He raises some money for deals and helps guarantor some loans and stuff like that. So we still work together often. I'm just not in the single family space anymore. He's still pretty heavily in there.
Okay.
But he built his business up to ultimately exit and give it to an operator to run, and I think that's a great way to build a flipping business. I'm not knocking single family house flipping, but there has to be a means to an end, right? So if your goal is to build a well-oiled machine that you can ultimately hire a COO or a president or, partner with somebody who's going to run the day-to-day so that you can then step out and then do something different, right? That is a better business plan than I'm going to go out and swing the hammer and flip all these houses and do it all myself. Like just have an exit plan, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple things there, cost segregation, and maybe for the benefit of the audience, because I'm sure you're still doing that on all your future offerings. Tell us a little bit about that. What does that do? You mentioned active income and being able to take depreciation against that, but tell us a little bit about how that all works.
Sure. So we buy a commercial building. For instance, the building we bought last Friday was $9.7 million. We'll do a cost segregation study. So what they'll do is they'll come in, they'll remove the value of the land, and they'll look at the value of the building and all of its depreciable assets, the windows, countertops, cabinets, the fridge, the appliances, lighting fixtures, everything that's depreciable. Typically, you depreciate over a 27.5-year schedule. With the 100% bonus depreciation that was written in when Trump came in, you could actually take all of the 27.5 years and you could accelerate it and take all of that depreciation in year one. So for us, if you look at like a $9.7 million purchase, maybe $4.5 million, we could take all of that depreciation and accelerate it and take those losses in year one, rather than amortizing it out over 27.5 years, which is huge for investors that need, write-offs against active income. Because now if you invest $100,000, well, this year is 60%. Last year was 80%. The year before was 100%. They're working on bringing back 100% bonus depreciation. We'll see how it goes. But, let's say you invest $100,000 in this calendar year, you're right around 40% of your dollar for dollar investment that you're going to get in a write-off for losses. So you invest $100,000, I'm going to send you a K1 with $40,000 in losses this year. So you can take those $40,000 in losses and you can go offset other income that you would have that's potentially taxable. So that's what a cost segregation study allows you to do. It's depreciate everything up front and then take those losses.
Yeah, huge opportunity for a lot of folks. And then tell me a little bit about when you got into multifamily. What was maybe your first acquisition? You just mentioned the one that you closed on Friday. Sounds like a pretty nice deal, large dollar amount. But what was the first one that you did? And tell us a little bit about kind of what value adds you were able to do with that one, and has that one gone full cycle?
Sure. Yeah, my first one has gone full cycle. It was actually, I first got started and I'd heard about syndications and stuff, and I knew that, I knew about them, but I was I like to try and learn and figure it out and then go bigger. So my first deal was a little 14 unit. It was $754,000. I actually found it through another wholesaler who, again, I told you, get out of obscurity. Like I met him at a RIA meetup, told him that I was looking at apartments. This is when I was flipping houses. I said, hey, I'm looking for small multifamily apartments. Told him what I was looking for. 2 months later, he actually stumbled upon a little 14 unit direct to seller from his marketing. And he was like, I don't know what to do with this. So me and two buddies, we each put up like $75,000, $80,000 for the down payment. And we went 33. We all guaranteed the loan and we closed the little 14 unit was the first deal. My second deal was a 21 unit that Bill and I went 50-50. It was $950,000. We each put up like $120,000. This is from the active income, right? We each put up $120,000. We closed that one. My third deal was a 27 unit, $1.3 million. And then after we got those three deals, I had actually kind of exhausted my cash reserves that I had to buy multifamily, but I didn't want to stop buying because I really enjoyed it. So then we put a 49 unit under contract, did a 506B syndication. It was $2.5 million. We raised $800,000 from friends and family in order to purchase the down payment for that one. And then after the 49 unit, we did a 65 and then we did a 93. And now we've been doing, between 50 and 150 unit deals for the last, 5 or 6 years. But it's been, it was a journey kind of, all right, I could do this. I understand this. I get it. And then it was like, well, let's see if we can go a little bigger. And then I was like, all right, we could do this one. Let's see if we can go a little bigger. And then we just kind of kept going. And I've exited all 4 of those first 4 deals. I've taken those full cycle and exited those. Most of my stuff has a 5 to 7 year timeline. It's 5 to 7 year horizon.
Okay. And what were some of the improvements and stuff that you made on some of those? Yeah.
Well, I bought those things well before kind of this most recent little bull run that we had after COVID. And I sold a lot. I sold half my portfolio in 21 and 22 when we had this. So pretty much all my exits came at this recent boom. Just, people offering silly prices, in my opinion. It's taking some chips off the table.
Yeah.
As far as the value add, right? There's two ways to increase. The cool thing about commercial real estate, let me just preface what I'm going to say with this. The cool thing about commercial real estate is the value of your building in commercial real estate, whether it's and I say commercial real estate, it's multifamily apartments, mobile home parks, self-storage facilities, office buildings, retail plazas, industrial complexes. That's kind of the gambit. When I say commercial, I mean everything under that umbrella. I have multifamily properties, I have mobile home parks, I have storage facilities, and I have office buildings in my portfolio. But 90% of my stuff is multifamily apartments. The cool thing about commercial real estate is the value is strictly based on the net operating income that the building produces. In a single family house, your value is based on the similar houses that are in the neighborhood and what price per square foot those houses sold at. But in commercial real estate, my building could be worth twice as much as the building right next door, even if it's the exact same size, because of the income that it produces. So the way you can drive value, it's called forcing appreciation. People hear this value add, right? The term value add gets thrown around all the time. But what does it actually mean? It means, how can I drive the net income? So you have income, expenses, and then your net income. How can I drive that net operating income, or the NOI? If you increase that, that's a direct multiplier in your value. There's only two ways to do it. You can increase rents, or you can decrease expenses. Or increase income, decrease expenses. Those are the only two ways to drive NOI. So, you need to be careful with where you're buying, making sure you're buying at a good basis, and that there is loss to lease on the rents or some value upside if you put money into the properties, that you can raise rents justifiably. And right now you need to be conservative with your underwriting, because we're seeing rent concessions in certain markets. We could talk all about the current market landscape and why you need to really be careful with the deals you're buying. And then getting economies of scale in like a little local market that you know really well is beneficial, because you can drive expenses down and it'll have the same effect on your value of your building. So for like the deals that we got started with, the 49 unit, for instance, it was a little mom and pop owner. He had owned it for 17 years, and his rent roll was on a napkin, and it was like the perfect avatar. He was way below market on rents. They were rented for like $700, and they were at least a $900 to an $1,100 price point. So we came in, we put some money into the units, spent like $7-8 grand a unit, renovated them, and then released them at market rate rents. Let it season for a little while. So seasoning is when you kind of let something stabilize. You let the financial stabilize for a while. So we let it season for a while, and then came up with a new valuation, and ultimately took that one to sale. We've done that on other properties where we actually come up with a new valuation and take it to a refinance, and then get all our investors their money back and then hold. But those are the ways you can add value. I mean, now the properties that I have 855 units within a 2-mile radius here in Murfreesboro, and we get like great economies of scale because we share payroll, we share maintenance guys, we can share labor across materials across. So it's like we can drive the expenses down, being a local operator, which is why you need to get to know your market.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I was going to ask you, kind of, it's kind of neat how you progressed up. I mean, I think it's kind of a natural way to do it, where you're starting with something a little bit smaller, and then kind of each time adding units. As you did that, what did you see that, once you got to X size, here's some things you had to do differently because of that. And then I do want to hear a little bit too about, how you're handling property management.
Yeah. I guess what I would say is, the bigger deals it's a business, right? Let me demystify this whole commercial real estate thing. You're buying a business. You create an LLC, or the LLC exists, and you're going to underwrite the LLC. It's a business, and the business just happens to be an apartment complex, and the income just happens to be rent. But the business has top line income and has expenses. So you're underwriting a business. And I think that is kind of the biggest thing that you need to understand, is that if you can control the way that you can underwrite the business, and conservatively underwrite it, project it for a future exit, that's what's going to help drive. When you talk about property management, we do third-party property management on all of our stuff. So everything is, we have a couple smaller properties now that we'll manage in-house, but most of our stuff is all third-party management. It always has been. I think a great manager can turn something into gold, and a really bad manager can screw up a great deal. So you need to have good partners. And when I say partners, your property management's your partner, your bank is your partner, your lender's your partner, your investors are your partners. That's why I talk about partnerships a lot. But your property manager is you have to be really dialed in with them, because at the end of the day, you don't want to put your phone number on the for lease sign and take calls from tenants and handle work orders. You're going to be your own bottleneck, and you're going to be able to do one deal. But if you can get a good PM identified and build a relationship with them, that PM can really help drive your business plan and allow you to scale, especially if you can develop some trust with them. So I would encourage everybody that wherever your markets you're looking into, build relationships with bankers and lenders right now. That's important. And build relationships with property managers even before you have a deal, because you don't want to wait till you have a deal to start reaching out to banks to say, like, they still have an appetite for lending? And you don't want to wait till you have a deal to reach out to property managers to start building that relationship and getting on their radar either.
And what about some of the differences as you kept increasing the size? Were there things that you had to do differently as you grew? Was there kind of a sweet spot once you got above a certain number of units?
Yeah, that was the question. I after I did the business thing, I didn't come back to that question. So as I grew, the thing that I realized is there are certain things that you don't have on a 14 unit that you have on a 125 unit, like payroll expenses, things like that. Like your expenses change a little bit, but for the most part, they're pretty similar. They just grow exponentially based on the size of the property. So you'll always have you have your controllable expenses and your non-controllable expenses. Your non-controllable expenses are your taxes, your insurance, and your utilities. Like those are going to be there no matter what. Your controllable expenses are your contract services, which is like your lawn care, any pest control that you may have, things like that. Your contract services, Comcast, internet, laundry contracts, if you have laundry machines and equipment like that. You have general and admin, which is your administrative cost to run it. You have your property management costs, whether it's an 8% property management fee, whatever it may be. And you have your turn costs and your repairs and maintenance. Those are your controllable expenses. Those can fluctuate based on how many units you have. And then you have your non-controllables. So as you grow, I think that what you see is just sort of your expenses growing as your property grows, but it's just more zeros, right? So I would just tell people that it's what I've found now that I'm looking back is like the bigger deals were honestly easier to get done than the smaller deals. They're actually a little bit easier. Like, I hate to say it, but it's like it's easier to do a 100 unit than it is to do a 10 unit. And that may sound a little crazy, but it's kind of easier to run. It operates as its own little business there. Like we have a person on staff. It kind of runs it as its own property, right? Whereas a 10 unit, like you kind of have to keep a really close eye on it. And it's a little different. So it's kind of a lesson that I would think is don't get too scared on the zeros, because it's the same formulas. It's the same math. And the bigger deals are actually a little bit easier to raise money for. They're actually easier to operate. In my opinion, they're easier to operate. And you get the economies of scale with having 100 units versus 10. So, yeah. I mean, you can buy the small stuff. Like I don't sleep on the small stuff. I got a ton of it, but that's what I learned about growing and scaling.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. You would expect that it'd be a lot more difficult, but there's financing is more available a lot of times with the larger deals as well. What about financing? Who are you primarily using to fund your deals, and what does that typically look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's two ways we go, right? It's community bank or agency. We have a $32 million deal closing on the 10th, which is in less than 2 weeks. That's an agency loan, Fannie Mae loan, $24 million is the loan amount. And we have an equity group bring in the equity check, and then we're putting in $2 million of our own. The one that closed on Friday was a local lender, Wilson Bank and Trust, was a little local community bank here that knows the market really well. So it just depends on your business plan. It depends on the deal profile, on who's going to have an appetite for it. If it's a very stabilized property north of a couple $1 million, you might want to go agency debt. Right now, the Treasury, I forgot what it was, like 4.6% as of this morning. So if you're floating over the Treasury, you're probably at low sixes on agency debt, probably 6.2, 6.3% if I were to lock today on an agency loan, whereas community bank debt is more in the mid sevens. So 7.5% interest rate is kind of where you trend, maybe closer to 8% if it's more of a value add deal. You can get a higher LTC or LTV on your community bank debt. So LTV, loan to value, LTC is loan to cost. Typically, you'll get a little bit more higher leverage. But you typically have a higher interest rate. You can also have low to no prepayment penalties on community debt, but with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you're going to have some yield maintenance or some standard defeasance that might make it cost prohibitive if you wanted to get out like in 2 years, 3 years. You'll have a big prepayment penalty. So I always tell people to pair your debt with where you're at in the market cycle and then what your plan is to exit. Because if you're raising capital for these things, you've got to exit at some point. And I don't think far too many people do not think the exit through long enough as like takeoffs are optional, but landings are mandatory. Like you don't have to buy the deal, but the second you buy it, you got to land that plane at some point, right? You can land it in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, but most terms I'm seeing on debt are 5 to 7 years. So you have to have a landing, whether it's a refinance or sale. And if you're raising money, you can't like tell the investors, I'm going to give this property to my grandkids one day. Well, hell, they're going to want their money back at some point. Like you can't just say, I'm building a legacy. I'm going to give this to my grandkids if you're raising capital to buy it. So, like I see people do that. I'm like, well, what about your investors that want their money back?
Right.
So the point is to pair your debt with where you're at in the market cycle. And that depends on how you see the market forecasting based on Jerome Powell and what he thinks the Fed's going to do. And also what you think the socioeconomic landscape looks like, which this is not probably the forum for me to talk about that. But depending on where you think we're at in the market cycle, which I would recommend getting as much long-term fixed rate debt as possible. The cash flows at least a 1.3 to 1.5 DSCR. I would recommend right now getting as much long-term debt. Stay away from bridge, high interest bridge stuff. And unless it's a freaking home run, you need to stay away from the high interest bridge product with 12, 24 month maturity dates because you could get really pinched. It's just my opinion. It's what I'm seeing. A lot of people are underwater on these refinances that they thought they were coming out into a 4% interest rate environment. So just keep that in mind. But you pair that stuff up and then that'll ultimately give you some guidance as to where you're going to go with your community banks. But build relationships with community banks now because a lot of them are not even lending to new relationships. A lot of them have held up. Their underwriting has gotten a lot tighter in the last 2 to 3 years than it was before. So if you don't have that relationship, and you're looking at a 60-day close window and you're starting from zero, it's going to be very tough for them to get that deal done in your window to close. So
what, and maybe tell me a little bit more on, so you mentioned seasoning a while back and, how you need to kind of season the financials and everything. What are some of the things that the bank's going to be looking at and how are they wanting to see, what are they going to want to see in the property to say, hey, this is a solid deal to be able to move forward and, either refinance or whatever the case may be.
So they're going to want your rent roll. They're going to want your T12, trailing 12 months operating statement, and they're going to want your rent roll. What they're going to want to see is steady collections. So collections that are steady without a high delinquency. So you don't have a bunch of people that aren't paying. Right? You have steady collections at market rates, low delinquency, controlled expenses. So your expenses, when I say stable seasoning, meaning your expenses are pretty standard month to month. You don't have crazy fluctuations, in expenses. And they're going to want to see your net operating income being at a really strong, profitable number month over month. And then what they look at is it's called a DSCR. So it's a debt service coverage ratio. This DSCR is the terminology. You need to understand it because it's pretty much the guiding principle of the leverage that you're going to be able to get. So when they're looking at refinancing your loan, a bank will not touch anything that's less than a 1.25 DSCR, meaning if they're going to loan and their mortgage payment is $100,000 a month, you have got to have at least a net operating income of $125,000 a month for them to even think about touching that loan. So that's your DSCR is a 1.25. So I'm covering my net operating income covers my mortgage payment by at least 1 plus 2.5 or 2.5. I like to have a 1.5 DSCR. So they want to see that whatever the new loan amount is, they want to see a really strong, stable coverage ratio that they know they could confidently loan that amount and your net operating income is going to cover that loan. Even if you have some fluctuation in your occupancy or you have some things like happen that might be unforeseen, they know that no matter what, you're not going to dip below a 1.2 or a 1.3 DSCR because once you start getting down to a 1, now you're break even, meaning you're not cash flowing anything. And if you go below 1, you're coming out of pocket to service your debt. So keep an eye on that DSCR metric. That's the one thing that I'm really looking at really tightly on all of our deals that we're looking at is, and that's how you can stress test your deal too. Hey, if shit hits the fan and we have 20% of our tenants move out, what does that do? Do we still cover? Do we still have a 1 DSCR? right? Hey, if our expenses shoot up, insurance cost doubles. I'm seeing insurance rates are wild throughout the US, right? Insurance doubles on our renewal. Do we still cover at a 1.3 DSCR? Are we still strong? How healthy is our deal? So you keep that stuff in mind. And that's what a lot of banks are looking for, is that stable net operating income, and then making sure you have enough coverage to get your loan out. Because with the increase in interest rates, now your DSCRs are much lower, so your loan outs are going to be much lower, which is why we're seeing people having to do cash in refis versus cash out refis, is because the loan proceeds are based on that coverage ratio, and they're coming in a lot less than what they were 3 years ago when interest rates were 4%.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. A lot of good things to think of there. And obviously, you're still buying in this market, right? So you just closed a deal last Friday, and you got another one. Looks like it's going to be closing here pretty soon. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there. With all the various changes, and I know no one has a crystal ball, but I always like to hear what each guest has to say about the future here.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep this within our time window here. So, I think I'm seeing, like, number one, lending has tightened up. Number two, investors have tightened up. Like, everybody, I think, it's harder to raise money. It's harder to find deals, and it's just tough out there in the market. It doesn't mean that there's not deals to be had. I'm seeing people transact all over the place. It's still happening. Now, you got to get out of obscurity, number one, right? We already talked about that. Number two, you have to have really strong ability to, I believe, to look at deals, say no to the wrong deals, and say yes to the right deals. Because in this market, like, your success may be completely predicated on the deals you say no to versus the deals you say yes to.
Yeah.
And far too many people are saying yes to the wrong deals, and and that's what's putting them behind the eight ball, and the reason they're not being successful. So be okay to say no. How do I want to say this? Don't worry about the interest rate. Like, don't get paralyzed by the interest rates rising, or oh God, we were at 4%, now we're at 6%. Like, who cares if the deal makes sense?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not saying just go buy any deal, but I am saying, like, I don't care if the interest is 4% or 7%. If my deal covers at a 1.5 DSCR and I'm still profitable and I'm able to pay my investors the 15% IRR that I'm guaranteeing them, like, if that still all makes sense, then go do the property, do the transact on the deal. Like, there are deals that make sense out there. Yes, we have to buy them cheaper than we did in 2021, 100%. But sellers are coming around to the fact that their 2021 pricing or 2022 pricing, when interest rates were 3.5%, right? That pricing is out the window now. So they're either lowering their expectations to where the market is, or they're just holding firm because they had that price in mind in 2021 and now they want to get it. But that's just not a deal for you. So you say no to it. So we are seeing, we're seeing transactions happen. We're actively working them. Like I said, we got Fannie Mae loans, we got agency debt going on. We've adjusted our underwriting to stress tests for no rent increases over the next 24 months. What does that do to our underwriting? So I'm not able to raise rents organically for the next 24 to 36 months. We're seeing, like, some concessions in some more primary markets. I know Nashville in general is doing, on the Class A stuff, right? They're giving 2 to 3 months free on a 12-month lease. So that it brings their effective rates down pretty substantially. So you need to understand concessions and absorption and how that really affects, because I don't invest in Class A apartments. I only invest in Class C plus. My average rental price point across my portfolio is $1,150, $1,200. You come look at my stuff. I'm workforce. I'm working class. $1,000 to $1,200 rental price point, C plus, B minus, and that is just my bread and butter. It's what I like. I always will have a renter, in my opinion.
Yeah.
My average occupancy is 95%. I like that property. I think they cash flow well. I operate them the right way, so I stay out of the Class A $2,400 a month price points. That stuff is getting absolutely hammered right now. You could talk about all the Class A office that has gone back to the banks. We got big office buildings that are 50% vacant in these big cities. And that's going to continue to hurt the overall commercial market and banks in general. But multifamily properties that are bought right in the right locations are going to stand the test of time, in my opinion. You have Jerome Powell has announced that there probably will be zero interest rate reduction this year. Maybe they do 25, 50 basis points by the end of the year, but doubt it. So you got to survive till 25 on current rates. That's the saying right now, survive till 25. And in 2025, I do think we'll get some rate pullbacks to try and open things up. But we're we're seeing a lot of the lag indicators of the inflationary measures that were put in place in 2020, 2021, and all the money that's been printed and sent for this triple front war that we're apparently fighting now that's not anywhere close to us. I think what happens in November is going to be really telltale on where the market's going to go. I am anxiously waiting to see how things play out. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I really don't like either side. I think the whole federal government is a giant Ponzi scheme of a bunch of money laundering, warmongering pedophiles. I just don't like the government at all. So if you're my outlook, unfortunately, is a lot of what they do determines how the Fed responds, which determines what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm in the game inadvertently, although I would much rather not have anything to do with the decisions they make. But unfortunately, it directly affects how we operate in real estate. You can't have real estate without politics because politics directly affect real estate.
Right.
So you have to kind of understand what's going on, and you have to understand how. I always tie it back to the financial system. So I always look at what's going on and how that's going to affect the Fed and the decisions that the Fed makes that's going to affect our monetary policy, which affects how well and how bullish we can be on the market. So when the government just prints a bunch of digits, they don't even bother printing it anymore. When they just drop a bunch of digits and send, tens of billions and hundreds of billions of dollars to other places, right? They're further bankrupting the economy, which is eventually that bubble is going to pop. But that's a whole nother problem that we're going to have to solve in the long term.
For sure.
But in the short term, whatever happens is going to directly affect. I think if the Democrats get in again, they're going to drive this economy into the ground, because I think that party has just become basically a front for a socialist communist takeover, and the Republicans are not much better. But at this point, we need Trump to get in just because of the freaking monetary measures. I mean, I'm not looking forward to seeing all the crap that's going to come along with it. But At this point, we need the economy to open back up, and we need to be a strong America focused country so that we can all thrive and create wealth for ourselves, and then help and give from a full cup. Because right now we're as a country, we're just giving from an empty cup, and we're helping other countries, and ours is just in shambles, in my opinion. So I think that's our best bet. I also cannot believe that over the last 8 years, we have not come up with two better candidates than an old man with dementia and an orange guy that can't control his Twitter account. Like,
right.
Jesus Christ, everybody, we are like, what are we doing? But I mean, I'm just over here trying to buy more real estate. So who am I?
Right. No, great point. And I agree on quite a bit of that. So. Okay, well, let me ask you, Chad. First, I've appreciated this. Has been really good. I've enjoyed hearing your perspective. And maybe how can people find out more about you? How can they invest with you if they'd like to on some of these deals you got coming up?
Yeah, go to I'm on Instagram the most. Mr. Chad King on Instagram. It's MR Chad King. And then if you find me on Facebook, I'm Chad King on Facebook. Just shoot me a message. Let me know that you heard this or that you're interested, and we'll get you on the we'll get you on the newsletter list. And we'll talk shop. I think I play a long game. I'm interested in building relationships, and when you invest with us, it's a marriage. We're here for a long time, and we're partners. So, love to build a relationship and talk to you if you're interested in investing, and find out what your goals are and go from there.
And then I've got two more questions for you that I ask every guest. And,
Sure.
And the first one would really be for maybe somebody who is just starting out in their investment journey. What advice would you give them?
Just starting out in their real estate investment journey?
Yes.
Are they passive investing, or are they actively trying to source deals to go? Or are they passively investing?
Let's say passive on this one.
Yeah. Know your operators. The people you're investing in a person, not a deal.
Right.
That's my biggest thing. Please, God, know the track record of your operators, know what kind of core values they have, what kind of humans they are. Because when a deal goes south, that's when you see someone's true colors. And I'm seeing a lot of people that are not getting paid back because they thought the deal was sexy, but the operator didn't know what they were doing. And you're investing in people, you're investing in an operator if you're investing passively.
No, that's great. And I think you're right. I mean, you do see people's true colors when things get a little bit tough. And so to have somebody that's been around long enough, that's been time tested, is a good thing. So How about any book recommendation? Doesn't have to be real estate related, but it certainly can be. Just something that's been impactful to you.
I think everybody needs to read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. I got a ton of, I could go through all the sales books and everything, but if you're not taking extreme ownership of your life, I think that's the biggest problem I see in the culture of America is just kind of the entitlement mentality. Everybody wants a handout. And nobody's taking ownership. Everybody's so quick to point fingers at the reason they're not successful is because of this person or whatever, or the government, or they point all the fingers and nobody takes ownership of their life. Every decision you make, the reason you are where you are is because it's a sum total of all the decisions you made up until this point. And until you take ownership of that fact, you'll never be able to control where your destination is 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So start there and get your mind right, because you can't come into this space if your mental game isn't strong. And the marketplace rewards action. It rewards activity. It rewards results. It doesn't reward tenure. I don't care if you've been on this planet for 50 years. I don't care if you've been in real estate for 25 years, and the market doesn't care either. I could come in and do 1,000 times more activity than you, and I'm gonna get results 1,000 times faster. So take ownership of the activity that you're putting into the market, and then take ownership of really all your personal choices. You got to get your house in order. I'm big on personal fitness and health and mental wellness and controlling what you put into your body, controlling what you put into your mind. You get one vehicle. Right. And a lot of us are not paying attention to what we're putting into our vehicle. Our food, our brain, what we're putting in is the direct output. And you got to take ownership of everything that goes in.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. Great book too. Yeah, I enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Chad, I sure appreciate your time today, and I think we'll call it a show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Keith. I had a good time.
Appreciate you. I did too. Thanks, Chad.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.